like when we will be airing this episode, it is gonna be already past the anniversary of the EU-Turkey deal. It's important. It's a very important topic because it changed a lot in the EU migration policy.
10 years.
10 years. 10 years. March 18th marks the 10th anniversary of the EU-Turkey deal, which changed so much. And it started the externalization of the European asylum policy. And we're getting a lot of those questions like, how did we get to this place from all this solidarity movement around Europe to hostility to so many different bills that criminalize humanitarian aid? Like how did it happen? And we could of course record a gigantic podcast. It would be probably several hours talking about this, but today we want to cover it in, let's say, a nutshell and discuss those most important pieces of legislation that got us here.
Is this episode censored? Or can we speak freely?
I believe even if I censor you, I believe you will find a way to uncensor yourself in edit.
I have a feeling that may be a lot of beeping in this episode, but the last 10 years have been pretty brutal for a lot of lives and a lot of families, and all of the laws that we took for granted and assumed would be always there, and it maybe they really weren't being adhered to before the EU-Turkey deal came into action. Greece had already been sanctioned in 2011 for their conditions for people, and there were already protests of people being held in detention longer than they should have been. But
it's a different level.
EU-Turkey deal 2016 really sets the table for how can we legalize breaking the law. That's really what they did.
If I can take a small step back, because I think it's important to first say that we had an important also piece of legislation back in 2015, so 1 year before, EU relocation scheme, which seemed to be this bigger solidarity movement attempt, at least at other member states showing solidarity towards Greece and Italy, which were the main crossing points for asylum seekers. And they committed, all the other European countries, almost all of them, committed to take some number of refugees. It was supposed to be in total 160,000 from Greece and Italy, and relocate them in their home countries.
Maybe the South Park guys can come over and they can do an episode called Blame Poland, Czechia, Slovakia, and Hungary instead of Canada.
To be fair, Poland initially agreed to it, and then the government changed and decided that it's not going to happen. But so the numbers of people who were supposed to be relocated to different countries were based on quite reasonable factors, like, of course, the population, the unemployment rate, things that really made sense, right? And the numbers were really not big, because if you think 160,000 divided by all European member states, Poland, for example, was supposed to take a little bit more than 2,000.
Yeah, it was
absolutely nothing.
But I'd argue that those four states, kind of creating a block of resistance to this, started us on this path to where we are now, where they were just like, no. We're not going to do that, and we're going to be the opposition. We're going to be the party of no, and we're going to refuse it completely. And it is like the turning of the screw towards the radicalization of the populace in the voting, where then they have to start playing towards that potential type of a voter who would never really support any of the other side in the first place. But now you see the middle gives into this as well, and now we have a terminology called mandatory solidarity.
Sorta, but they are playing with this term a lot. And when we will go into the new pact on migration, we're going to discuss it more. However, it's important to know that after a year, this relocation scheme didn't bring the effects it was supposed to. Of course, Germany and France were leading the relocation process, but other member states simply did not keep their part of the deal.
And then they screwed over the South, and they left everyone on the Mediterranean dealing with it alone.
Absolutely.
Which led to the radicalization of the population and the governments.
Of course. yours. So then, a year later, we have the EU-Turkey deal, the main protagonist of our podcast today, which was a completely different take. Antagonist. Which was a very different approach. This now meant that we will externalize the migration policy. We will not deal with it within the European Union. We're going to outsource it.
Pay for
right?
it to stay outside.
Exactly. We're going to pay Turkey 6 billion euros to keep refugees and migrants and asylum seekers in Turkey, do not allow them to leave, control their borders, and as a thank you, we're going to give them money, first of all, the most important thing. Then we will also discuss a visa waiver program for Turkish citizens in the EU and start the talks about Turkey potentially being an EU member state.
But in our last episode, when we were talking about, Iranian dissidents and activists who were refugee status in Turkey, how difficult life was for them and how many of them are in danger of being deported, and the conditions where it's like really, really intense, almost like the kind of stuff you see in Shawshank Redemption, where the guys don't get out into the yard for more than 30 minutes a day or something. It's like, that's the life that you would have, and that's the life that people would have because Europe paid for that. They paid Erdogan $6 billion to manage the problem. Keep it out. And then, here's $6 billion to you, and then now we'll start to legally break the international laws.
And we know that Turkey played with this card pretty well, because when EU demanded more control and refused to pay one of the installments, Turkey simply showed EU what they can do by not controlling the borders and simply allowing people for a day or two to simply cross unattended through either the Mediterranean Sea or the northern border in Evros. And in Evros, people were basically brought to the border with buses organized by we don't know for sure, but it was pretty obvious that the government at least allowed for those buses to just come without any problems. And we had those clashes at the border. So it all looked absolutely terrible, but Turkey got what they wanted, right?
Which was, since it's censored, I'd be like, you pay me. Is basically what he was saying. You don't want this problem. You don't want this chaos. You pay me. You pay me. And then boom, then they give him more money, and then and it doesn't really solve the problem, and it just legalizes pushbacks on the other side of the sea.
And this was only the beginning of those the different deals that EU and different EU member states signed with other third countries, right? Countries where they intended to either send asylum seekers that were already on their territory, or countries that they were asking to monitor the border and stop people from coming, like Libya, for example, right? Like Spain signed a deal with Morocco to do the same. And it was always questionable how legal and ethical those deals are.
Well, how could it be even questionable how ethical it is to leave people in Libya? Are you kidding?
Exactly.
Like, how could they sleep at night?
This is something that I still cannot believe is not in our collective mind, that Libya is a country where refugees, especially from sub-Saharan Africa, are being sold on a market, like seriously in colonial times. A CNN journalist recorded everything, showing how people are betting other people's lives for whatever things they needed them to be, buying human beings, right? This is what is happening to refugees and asylum seekers in Libya. And we are now discussing the ethical parts of it. There's nothing to discuss there. Libya is a country where human rights do not exist for refugees and asylum seekers. There are many places like this, I know, but Libya is a country where refugees and asylum seekers are being sold like objects. And this should never, never be part of any type of EU deal.
But they're also making deals with other countries that leave people dying in the Sahara because they just drop them off at the borders and just say, die in the desert. Who cares? Mm-hmm. They don't have to shoot them. Mm-hmm. They just leave them there. And then they die of the elements. It's unbelievable. Yeah. And then you have European countries doing that at the sea. Mm-hmm. So this is the turning point, because they already started, like basically saying that these are not really people. These are a threat. Mm-hmm. They are overwhelming us. This is too much. Therefore, we have to do what we have to do. And now we're going to claim self-defense. Mm-hmm. And we're going to throw away all the protocols and all the conventions and all the things. This is the starting point. And in the islands in Greece, back in this time, this is the beginning of their illegal use of geographical restriction. Nowhere in the refugee convention or the protocols from 51 and 67 does it say that you're allowed to hold people indefinitely in a prison state. Mm-hmm. But they did it for years on those islands, to the point where Moria became what it became before the fires. Yes. 247 fires. But
So the number of people crossing to Europe was definitely reduced by the EU-Turkey deal at the cost of keeping people trapped on the island in hotspots and starting those other deals with other countries that were now suddenly taking over some of the asylum commitments of the EU-Turkey deal, of the European Union, I'm sorry. But now this really didn't work for anybody, let's be honest, right? The migration was still ongoing.
Well, no, it did work. It worked for the radical right.
Yeah.
In all of the countries that right now are sweeping into power locally and nationally. And it's as if these countries can't learn the lesson from the neighbor or from the other. They just have to learn it themselves. Every country that keeps allowing this group of people to get into power, too many people in the country are just not participating in the election process because they really don't represent a majority. And as we were saying in the last episode, we have way, way too many examples in history of extreme and loud and aggressive minorities controlling a majority. And it's happening in America, it's happening in Germany, it's happening in all sorts of southern European countries where you have radical far-right groups getting into office and then passing very draconian laws. And it's just going to get worse before it hopefully gets better. But at the current moment, it is really trending in the wrong direction.
Right, trending in the wrong direction. Okay, trending in a very also strange direction. I will argue both sides here because I see some positives, but it is trending. The trend is already here, the new EU Migration Pact. And very different opinions on the EU Migration Pact. And there are some arguments that I appreciate, and there are some that are just simply not working.
I'm looking at it personally to find which articles we can, reject and throw away and pick to throw away, just like they did with the 51 Refugee Convention. Because it was like, which one do you want to throw away today? Article 14, Article 9, Article 8. Like, they basically just shredded this international covenant and then just started creating another one that helps legalize the illegality of their actions. And the Migration Pact is this kind of redo of 2015 in an effort to say, well, we understand northern Eastern European countries. We understand how you don't really want to help the Southern European countries. But our mandatory solidarity will be you don't actually have to take 30,000 refugees within a certain window of time, but you could just pay X amount of euros, 20,000 or so per refugee for them to stay where they are. So even inside Europe, they're externalizing it. Even inside Europe, they're leaving the southern countries the same as the next spring out. It's unbelievable.
But it is presented as a solidarity gesture, right?
But the terminology in the actual pact is called mandatory solidarity.
Yeah, mandatory solidarity for somebody to...
Is this like kindergarten?
Yeah.
What the
So
fuck?
to make sure that everybody understands, right? the proposition is that 30,000 refugees will be resettled again from the south to other countries, and if other countries do not want to take them, they can either contribute with financial means or operational means. So, for example, like support at the borders and things like that, right?
Or pay for illegal detention centers. Support the mass incarceration of individuals who arrive and are immediately considered criminals when they're just arriving to exercise their international rights, to have an asylum claim heard. Just heard. Not approved, just heard.
Yes. There are some elements of the EU Migration Pact that look very reasonable on paper, right? So, because if you think of it, the screenings within the border procedure within 7 days, it makes sense, right? Screen people as fast as possible and then move forward with the application.
Okay. Is there anyone in our community who has ever experienced a 7-day processing experience?
Of course not. Of course, the EU Migration Pact is still to be implemented, right? The deadline to implement it is June this year. But the argument is that it can speed up the process. The counter-argument is that it can actually take away the right of some people to legal representation.
And fast-track rejection.
Exactly, because some people will be rejected extremely fast and will have very little time for the appeal.
They've even kind of taken the appeal away.
Yeah.
You don't even have the right of appeal as they used to.
And if you can imagine, we have our several hotspots in Greece. So it's Lesbos, Samos, and several other islands. If you're on this island, getting a lawyer within like 3 days for you to make sure your appeal works. I actually don't remember right now if it's 3 days or more, so please don't quote me here, but it's a very short period of time. Find a lawyer on a small island who will represent you right now in your appeal process when you have to prepare lots of documents and so on. That's a very, very problematic issue.
Back in 21, before this went through, 3 years before this went through, people would get rejected. They had 10 days. Just 10 days to file an appeal or to go through some other legal process to try to like pull their case out of the asylum procedure and go into like open Greek legal system to say that I'm going to challenge this ruling. But, like if you, like you're saying, like almost every case that we know of that someone was finally successful, they needed a lawyer to get to a positive decision after a rejection or a second rejection. Normally what would happen is you would just automatically, very quickly get rejected a second time. And then they'd be like, you've been double rejected, get out. You have 10 days to leave the country. We don't care how, just go. And then they shifted to starting to like almost fast track mass approval to just send people north. But now 3 years later, you're in a position, 5 years later, you're in a position where this is just like codifying a fast track to rejection and to deportation or detention.
Yes. So this is what is happening now in like more and more countries are implementing this fast border procedure for countries, for individuals that come from countries that are likely to be rejected, right? Yeah. That means that there is this sort of bias on you that if you come from this country and we already know that the rejection rate is around 50 or 60%, we sort of assume you will not have the case, right? So that can be the problem because your documents will not be maybe checked that thoroughly.
Not to jump too far ahead towards what Greece is doing currently or what they did last summer, but like if you're from Sudan and you have an open like madness unfolding in your country for 3 years, you have a 99.9% chance of getting asylum in Europe. And yet all of those Sudanese that were coming to the island south of Crete are immediately detained and criminalized. Yes. And then a lot of them were held in detention on the mainland afterwards, and many of them are probably in limbo to the point of potentially being deported, but they should get almost 100% protection. Yes. So what is this list of countries that you're likely to be rejected? And this safe list of countries? Oh my God. Okay. Get back to the Migration Pact, and then we can come back to Greece because they are our true antagonists in this episode, as normal.
So the Migration Pact also caters to the, let's say, needs of the larger population, meaning the right-wing movements are growing, and the European Commission is introducing different laws that may sort of calm them down a little bit. And it sounds very reasonable, again, on paper, that we will have the biometric database right now of everybody, right? But this is happening also not only like for refugees, it's like more and more on the external borders of the European Union for also people who cross from other countries. So it feels like this should be one of the natural things to introduce towards refugees. And it makes sense from a security point of view, right? So just to point out that there are different aspects that are viewed as positive and possibly useful for the general system.
But, there's this like ridiculously paternalistic behavior here where they're trying to say Europe doesn't want. I remember I was just we were in hanging out with some people from Portugal, and they were saying, of course refugees should be protected, and if they come from this place or that place, but no Moroccans. And you're like, this guy, I was like, oh my God, like what? And he had all the reasons why Moroccans were not okay to be in his country. But Morocco is on the list of safe countries. That you could never possibly have a right to asylum if you come from Morocco or Tunisia or Egypt. That seems politically motivated to me that 3 of the neighboring countries are seen as
the safe countries.
The safe countries, right?
Yes, absolutely.
And that also helps them potentially send people back to those quote unquote safe third countries if they create a deal. And now suddenly you may be having your asylum procedure processed in Egypt or Tunisia or Morocco. It's pretty dirty.
It feels like we would really have to record one episode only on those external deals that EU is having with different countries to explain the real impact of those deals on human rights, on human lives, and
that cannot be a censored episode. Sorry, but you got to let that one just be free.
Oh, the almighty algorithm of YouTube, please do not censor us.
I thought that the interesting thing was this. They have categories in this migration pact that talk explicitly about stronger deportation measures, right? And crisis mechanisms to basically like throw away, as you were saying earlier, they have the right to suspend this, or they have the right to temporary suspend asylum claims, or because it's a crisis. And what determines the crisis? It was not a crisis this past summer when not a tsunami of people were coming to Crete. Yet it was a crisis in the media, and it was a crisis declared by the government, and then it was a crisis in Poland, and they did the same thing and suspended asylum, and then and they suspended in Greece. They suspended asylum long enough to then pass these other laws. So
it is.
It's a legal excuse to break international law. That's what this is.
I also do not want to deny Greece and Italy and Spain taking the gravity of this situation, right? I don't really like calling it a crisis because it is not really a crisis, definitely not a crisis of numbers. However, just last week, and last week for our viewers, it will be probably like last month, Crete again, so a larger number for the smaller community. It was more than 400 people within one day, suddenly, out of nothing, right? And this scares people, this scares locals. They see the need of sharing resources that are maybe scarce on the island as something that threatens the existence of this community.
I'm not taking that away. We spent enough time on Lesbos to know what it looks like for a local small community to deal with the challenges alone. They felt abandoned by Athens, and then Athens felt abandoned by Brussels. And this is a kick it down the road type thing. So of course, that small little fishing community on a small little island on the south coast of an island off the south coast of another island, they should not be dealing with this alone. But these are not the ways to do it. This is not the way to do it.
This is not.
Oh, yeah. Just surrender the quote unquote high ground that you claim your society is civilized based off of. It's like flipped upside down.
As always, as every European law, EU Migration Pact is a compromise of all member states, a compromise between Commission, Council, and the Parliament. It's extremely hard. It probably doesn't satisfy anybody at this moment.
Shenanigans. It's a compromise of morality. It's a compromise of morality.
Okay, it's hard. It's really easy to say it when you're an individual and you have your own opinion. If you really have to have everybody to vote for it, almost everybody.
Either we
to
have
vote
laws
for
or we
it.
don't have laws. It's that simple.
If
and if
all
we have
laws
them,
would be voted by unanimous decision, then we would never have any
but if
laws.
we have international laws, then follow the international laws. That's it. It's that simple. Yeah, and that's the scary part is that because these laws that are now going to become the new standard, the new status quo, are going to like really destabilize everything moving forward. And so the world that our kids and nephews and nieces and everyone are going to inherit is going to be really, really imbalanced and really, really stratified. And it's going to be really, really racist, racially motivated and biased and structured in ways that are, it's backwards, but the consequences will come later because the numbers are bearing fruit to say that you will truly be in the minority, 85% chance of being born somewhere other than Europe and America. So pretty soon, you're not going to be the epicenter of the societies. You're not going to be the epicenter of power anymore. And when you really want something in return to support you, it's not going to be there for you because the other side is going to be like, we actually read a history book.
When the pact was voted, everybody was rushing to vote it. It was very like
Christmas.
Yes, but so what we heard was that from several experts saying that they had to vote as fast as possible because if they wait for the next term of the parliament or if they wait longer, given the political climate right now, the pact would be much worse. It wouldn't be voted. There would be just chaos in general, or it would be all focused on deportation predominantly and externalizing to third countries. So it is viewed by the central as something that is positive and leaning towards a little bit partly towards human rights respect. And yes, and so it always depends where you are in your political views, right? This was super liberal for the radical right, and this was radical right for the left side. Again, compromise that had to be built within the EU institutions and EU member states.
Well, I just still think that you have really easy structures and things in place for you to make that compromise possible. You have binding international covenants, you have laws, and if countries don't want to be part of those international covenants, they can step outside of it. And then when calamity falls on their societies, then don't come screaming looking for the same supports. It's just like they want their cake and they eat it too. They want to be known as a refugee if they have a civil war, if they have a problem, but they don't want to provide the same protections for other people. And it's impossible for people to not see it as blatantly racist if this is the way it is structured. And we have way too much evidence in the last 4 years of what Europe is capable of doing, what America is capable of doing, what Australia is capable of doing, and what they are choosing to not do. And Greece, in particular, is like really, really choosing to do something and not do something else.
Can I ask you not to put Europe in the same basket with America at the moment?
They're copying
what
them.
America
but
is
they're
capable
copying
of
them.
doing is on a different level right now under Trump's presidency
I'm
than
talking
what
about
European
what
Union
Europe
is
and
capable
America
of
were
doing.
capable of doing in responding to the war in Ukraine. They were able to provide complete protection without question, and specifically Europe was able to absorb millions of people within a week, within a month, and then distribute them proportionally without mandatory solidarity. Everybody was able to go where they wanted to go, and everyone was able to get their protections. And that protection, I guarantee you, will be renewed now that it's about to expire. But it will be renewed. Yeah. Or it was just, when it expires, they'll renew it again. But they won't do that for Iran. They won't do that for Afghanistan. They won't do that for Sudan. They won't do that for Iraq. They won't do that for LGBTQ communities in all over Africa and in Turkey and in the Middle East. Like it's bullshit. I'm sorry. It's just insane.
Yes.
And they're taking their cue from Washington. So whatever Washington gets away with, Europe tries to copy it.
That's true.
It's really scary. That's what I meant by they should be lumped in the same basket right now because of the laws they're passing.
Going back to the pact, I think the really interesting part of it is how it looks like on the ground, because all member states have until June 2026 to implement it. And we know from experience, how does it look like in Greece? Some parts of it are already in action, and it doesn't really look very positive, especially under the new migration minister.
I can see
Your favorite.
I can see that you used to spend time in Brussels. You're very diplomatic about how you say these things. Oh my God. My God.
Okay.
The things that are happening
You
here.
can counterbalance me.
Okay. I don't know. I shredded all of these things about what they did, but we can jump to terrible, terrible pages of carnage for regular human beings. Like, it's really insane what you are now. We had an episode about this previously. We did an episode on just Greece alone when we first started the new season. You are automatically a criminal now upon arrival to claim asylum. You're already a criminal. You're already detained. And now they've increased the amount of time that they can legally detain you from 18 to 24 months. And it was insane that they could even hold you for 18 months in the first place. So what, 7 days to process an asylum claim, but we can hold you for 2 years?
Yeah.
What is that? Automatically, you're a criminal upon arrival. Doesn't matter where you came from, right? Unless you come from a European country. And then, of course, by all means, golden visa or maybe not a golden visa, but perhaps a digital nomad.
Yes,
visa.
Greece was always very welcoming to digital nomads and encouraging people to work remotely from this country
But I mean, in the most recent history, we just had this big success, which was the Free Humanitarians case, which for years our colleagues on Lesbos were being charged with human trafficking and felonies.
A few episodes back,
Yeah,
we covered the topic, so we encourage everybody to watch it.
And it was like this big, oh my God, this gasp of like this release of negative energy. This like, oh, finally something positive has happened here. And the Greek legal system stood up against the Greek political system. But the timing of it was really, really interesting because moments later, no one's paying attention. And then Greece in January passes all of these draconian laws. And I guarantee you that if the Free Humanitarians had done what they did, which was just help people, if they did it now, they would be found guilty of these felonies.
Absolutely.
As our other colleagues are now in danger of facing the laws as they stand now.
Okay, so let's just say exactly what those new laws are. And let's just be clear, because it's not just a law that is covering asylum situation. It's a law that is supposed to be dedicated to economic migration, meaning encouraging more people to get working visas, but like very specific. Of course, we want predominantly like working nomads. We want people from other EU countries. We want students. They prolong their right to stay by a year after their studies, so they can find jobs in Greece, which is all great for them, right?
Sure. Countries should be
exactly
promoting legal migration pathways, but they're 200,000 employees they want to find 200,000 workers, and they ignore the 140,000 workers already provided asylum in their country already. What about that? Like, you already have them, but no, they don't want them. They want those to go. And then they want to handpick the others that they do want.
Exactly. So within like this law that is supposed to boost the job market and so be something positive for Greece, they are sneaking some legislation that is supposed in a general official statement. It's about cutting the irregular migration, so something that is really bad, right?
I don't know how sneaky they're being when they broadcast it on
Yeah,
blast
but
on
like
TikTok and Instagram
I
every
know,
day.
but it's even hard for the left side to vote against it because it has so many like positive things, and then suddenly they introduce those articles that basically criminalize a lot of NGOs' work. And this is something that is extremely problematic that many NGOs signed a letter against and were protesting against.
70 civil organizations.
Yes, yet, like,
Well, what
of
does that
course,
matter?
without any effect
But what
at
does
the
that
moment.
matter?
Yeah,
But
so let's
now,
say
so
what exactly
okay,
does it
so
mean?
if you are, let's just break it back down to the way it was before. If you were and even still today, if you're a Greek citizen and you do something that in this law is seen as like, that's a no-no, you can't do that. You can't transport a person who came into the country illegally. You can't feed them. You can't house them. You can't support them, aid them. You are basically aiding an illegal entry. You'll get a misdemeanor. And this was kind of similar to the way the Polish the peace government was also treating like activists and different people who were like advocating for people to have the right for asylum at the border with Belarus. But now so you could still get a misdemeanor charge for those crimes of humanity, we'll call them. But if you do it as a member of an NGO, you're a human trafficker, you're a smuggler, and you can get 10 years on a felony charge.
And 50,000 euros fine. Yeah. And so this is just very, of course, but it's both. But so this is the big thing that if you're a member of an NGO for driving a refugee, even if a refugee or asylum seeker who doesn't have documents yet, if you're driving this person to a hospital, you can go to prison for 10 years and have to pay 50,000 euros for doing something like this. Let's be honest. It is really not only about like really hardcore smuggling cases. It is about supporting people who do not have documents, right? So like literally like giving a person a sandwich on the street. This can be viewed as such. The fine and the punishment is not the same for regular people, only if you're a member of an NGO.
Right, but they're trying to chill the civil society into extinction. They're trying to terrify every person who wants to act on their convictions and the morality and who does not want to throw that away and wants to do the right things and wants to follow international laws. They're trying to terrify them to do the right thing.
And it's not only that. We really have to be clear how big this is, because if a member of an NGO is being prosecuted, not convicted, just prosecuted, the Minister of Migration has the right to remove this NGO from the official register of NGOs working inside camps and providing support for refugees.
No conviction needed, just a prosecution, just an alleged claim. So they could say and lie and say whatever they want, and it doesn't matter, and you will still face the penalty of something that you weren't even really guilty of doing in the first place. And we have way too many examples of this happening to our colleagues on Lesbos, just standing at the wrong place at the wrong time. And this is in 2020, 2021, 2022. This is way before this. This is another level. And I'm really scared about what will happen to our colleague Tommy Olsen with the Aegean Boat Report, because in the past, when he was first charged with these types of crimes because of the work he does to like let the Greek Coast Guard know where people are arriving, not hiding it, telling them, hey, people arrived at this spot, at this beach in Jaramida, or at this spot near Montemaros, or wherever, or somewhere off the coast of Samos or Chios. He's telling them, go here. The people are here. Go take them to the RIC so they can be processed. He's not hiding it, but they're going to claim that he's a smuggler and a human trafficker, and they're already trying to get him. And, he's now in danger of actually facing these felonies because had he been charged before, if that case came up earlier, he probably would be acquitted like the Free Humanitarians. But now he's actually, he's right in the middle of the crosshairs.
It seems like one case ended against the government, so the new one has to start.
But I really feel like this is just like a witch hunt for one man. It's one guy.
It's one man. Tommy Olsen is the founder of Aegean Boat Report, which reports on the crossings. He has data from many sources, working with alarm phone, getting information about refugees who crossed to Greece, to also document, and this is what they really dislike, to document the pushbacks.
Right.
And
Because we have a situation where
yeah.
you could be on land in Greece, on land, documented, proven. Here it is. Here's the GPS evidence. And then suddenly you're in the sea, or suddenly you're drowned, or suddenly, if you're lucky, you're back in Turkey.
Absolutely. So now we have the European Arrest Warrant for Tommy Olsen.
Not just the Greek one.
Yes. We don't know how Norway is going to react to that. At this moment, they didn't comply with Greece's requests to send him to Greece. And this case is extremely important to monitor.
That'll be like the ultimate precedent. If that goes the wrong way,
absolutely,
then, everyone's sunk.
Yeah. So here we are. From the relocation scheme and solidarity mechanism
Criminalize
to
everybody. Send everybody to
criminalization.
prison for
Yes.
being good people. Great.
Okay, are we any optimistic about what's coming next?
I would say yes. I'm optimistic about an uncensored episode about all of these topics because we really have to do one and unpack it all in a more honest way.
Okay. Let's do it then. Okay, next one in 2 weeks' time.
You'll just have to polish off all your vulgarities because it can't be a one-sided affair, okay?
Okay. Next time. Okay, thank you very much and see you in 2 weeks' time.
All right. I'm not going to see you for 2 weeks? What? We can't hang out after the episode?
No,
Come on,
it's
please?
enough. It's enough.
All right.
Cut, guys. I mean, come on. How much time can you spend with one person?
Back with a very, very important update. During our episode, at the time of our recording, we referenced Aegean Boat Report's founder, Tommy Olsen, and how the Greek government had, over the course of the past several years, been coming after him for his work for human rights defense and documenting individuals as they arrive on EU soil, specifically on Greek islands in the Aegean Sea. And at the time of our recording, the Greek government had elevated their national arrest warrant into a European arrest warrant, and then they issued that to Norway. Since our recording, it has been affected, and the Norwegian government has taken Tommy into custody. He spent several days being held and then has now been released back home. But the case has expanded and we are yet to find out as to whether or not Norway will extradite him back to Greece. But at the time we recorded, we talked about the threat that he was facing as a result of the new laws that Greece has recently put into action in January of 2026. And now he is in extreme danger. If the Norwegian government sends their citizen back to Greece, he could significantly face jail time. And the court right now, the system inside Greece, is leaning against, with these new laws, it is leaning against individuals who are doing the type of work that Tommy is doing. And I just wanted to give you a little bit more context about what Aegean Boat Report is. For the past 8 years, their organization, which has essentially been Tommy, working tirelessly 24/7, responding to requests on a WhatsApp line from people who are arriving on Greek islands or are in distress at sea and are seeking support and protection, or they have arrived on the land and they are now seeking protection to start the process of having their asylum claims put into action. We have countless evidence. Over these 8 years, Tommy has documented unbelievable numbers of cases of people being pushed back, of people being threatened at sea, of being left to die at sea, being found on EU soil and suddenly being returned back to Turkey, left adrift in the sea and to push back into Turkish waters. He is not alone in this work, but his work with the Aegean Boat Report has been cited across international media for nearly a decade now. And his character is being assassinated by these claims, by these charges of human trafficking and being part of a criminal smuggling network. That is not what Tommy has been doing. He's been doing significant human rights defense. And even Mary Lawler, who is the UN Special Rapporteur for Human Rights Defense, and Amnesty International have reiterated the importance of the work that Tommy has done. We stand deeply and strongly beside him and the work that he's doing, and we'll keep you up to date on what's happening. But I also wanted to clarify that over the past days since he has been released, Aegean Boat Report continues to work. It continues to need support from individuals and organizations across the globe to ensure that this work and these reports are continued. and that this work is serving as critical evidence to determinations of human rights violations and systemic violations by the Greek government, which even the Fundamental Rights Office of Frontex has recently discovered systemic violent violations by Greece. So this work is verifiable, it is critical, it is important to continue, and Tommy deserves every right of justice to ensure that he is not wrongfully accused of crimes when he has been doing the right thing all along. So we stand with Tommy, we stand with the Aegean Boat Report, and check back for more information on how this case unfolds.
Since recording of this episode and the time it was supposed to air, several things happened that refer to this episode's topics, and we would like to really update you on those two. So, first of all, the situation in the European Parliament referring to the EU Migration Pact. European Parliament voted at the very end of March a new law that now is much stricter towards those who have been rejected. So asylum seekers who have been rejected and still decided to stay within the EU will now face harsher punishment, including detention and a ban on entering the EU. The second change in the law, however, is much more controversial because it refers to so-called return hubs. And several individual members of the European Union have tried it in the past. You may remember Italy signed a deal with Albania, or before that, UK signed a deal with Rwanda, which was questioned several times in the courts. But now, European Parliament gave a green light to all member states to actually offshore the procedures and just send asylum seekers who have been rejected to other countries. And now, it was not a unanimous decision. However, the majority voted it in. It was 389 in favor to 206 against and 32 abstentions. And we see that it's not unanimous. However, it goes with the trend. And the decision is controversial because the supporters of this law say that finally it will organize the return situation in the EU, because we know that EU has problems with sending back people who have been rejected in several instances. However, on the same time, there's a harsh criticism, especially from the human rights groups, saying that this will create black legal holes, because who is supposed to be responsible for the conditions in those third countries? And if something happens, you can imagine one member state of the EU signs a deal with, let's say, Rwanda. Something happens, somebody dies there. Now, who is to blame? Whose fault is it? Is it the fault of Rwanda, or is it the fault of the member state that signed this deal? So, many things to discuss here, and we will make sure that we will follow this legislation as it goes into power and is implemented by member states.